Hello, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Book. My name is John Christian. Today, my guest is self-published author and editor Gary Hill. He has compiled a 25th anniversary of the Music Street Journal. Now, being a musician myself, that sounds very interesting. So stay tuned. Hi, Gary. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back. And
Well,
we're doing. Hey, you look like yourself now instead of a
that's right.
foolish thing from
I
last.
can still go like that if you want. I need the hood and the makeup, and
Yeah,
maybe next year, maybe later on. Um, I understand you got something kind of timely you want to discuss, so let's hear all about it.
okay. So on February, well, actually, technically, it was January 28th. This came out, which is the 25th anniversary edition of Music Street Journal. And so, yeah, a quarter of a century. I've been doing Music Street Journal, and all the archives were published in 2018. I published all the archives as books. And then since then, every issue has come out as a book and online. In 1998, I got the idea to do a music zine because I'd seen a lot of other music zines, and I had some friends who were doing something called Music News Network, which was a print zine. So I thought, well, I could do that too, and that would be really cool because I've been a music fanatic for years by that point, and I've been playing music since I was about 15 years old, played in a bunch of bands, and so I thought, well, why don't I start doing this? And I got the idea, and at the time, AOL was the big thing for social media, and so I was in a bunch of progressive rock and yes groups, and I got about 25 or 30 people signed up as subscribers, free subscribers. And so I put the first issue out. It came out on February 1st, and it just had a bunch of reviews. There's a Microsoft Word document emailed to them. And it did pretty well, especially because I had Tony Levin, the bass player, the extraordinary bass player who's on so many things. I had his email address, and he was featured in a few of the reviews I did. So I sent it to him, and he sent it to his publicist, who's a gentleman named Chip Ruggiero, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I've known this guy 25 years now, but I've never actually heard his name pronounced. I've just seen it, typed out. But Chip got in touch with me and started connecting me with review copy CDs and hooking up interviews for me. And by the end of 98, the whole thing was a website, and it just started growing from there. And it's been published at first I think I did them every 6 weeks, maybe 5, 6 weeks. I was doing an issue. And then eventually it settled down to every 2 months. And it's been there for 20 years at least. In 2018, to celebrate the 20th anniversary, I wound up going through and over the course of time there and publishing all of them as books, all the archives. And then I thought, well, I've been doing this. Why don't I start just putting each issue out as a book as well? Mm-hmm. And the cool part with the book was, number one, you got a physical thing in your hand. But number two, I also did print edition exclusives in the books. Like the print edition exclusives in this one is a look back at the 25 years, but also all the people who contributed to it listed their top 10 albums of 2022, which that's not on the website at all, neither one of those things. So it's kind of cool.
You have pictures in your books as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely. See, in fact, this new issue, we've got a lot of concert photos Greg Olma did from Judas Priest and Queensryche, both of those. I've got contributors that have come through over the years too. At first it was just me, but I've gotten contributors. But yeah, we do photos, and the photos are in color on the website, but they're in black and white in the books just to keep the cost of the books down. Mm-hmm. But the Music News Network was one of those things, and it was devoted to progressive rock. And that was sort of where I started too. Music Street Journal at first was strictly progressive rock. And then at some point, I decided to stretch out from there. Because obviously I'm not only interested in prog rock. Prog rock is my big thing, but I'm into all kinds of different music that people might not expect, punk rock and all kinds of things. So I wanted to cover some of that too. But once I added things other than prog, it's always each issue is always at least half progressive rock, and which can be a pain sometimes because I get a lot of other stuff sent in to review, and it sits there sometimes because I don't have enough stuff to cover it, to make up the balance of it. Another thing that was a weird inspiration for me in the way I do reviews, I remember, I think it was in an issue of Kerrang, because I used to love Kerrang. And I think it was in an issue of that. There was a review of a Candlemass album, and the reviewer hated the album. He gave it like a 1 0 star review or something. But what he said about the album sounded like something I would really like. So I bought the album and fell in love with it. And one of the things I've done since I started doing Music Street Journal is we try more to describe things rather than say, well, this is great or this is bad, because great or bad are strictly up to each individual reviewer and their personal tastes. Whereas what the music sounds like is a little more objective. It's not entirely, because it depends on what I've heard and what it sounds like to me, but at least it's more objective.
Yeah.
We do still rate things, and to some degree, but also I don't do negative reviews, because I know very much as a musician, nobody sets out to put out a bad album.
Mhm.
And my idea of what a bad album is might be very different from what your idea of a bad
Yeah.
album. I mean, for instance, I think although they're hilariously entertaining because they're so bad, I think the Shags are terrible.
Of course.
But
Interesting, though. Very interesting.
And Kurt Cobain loved the Shags. They were one of
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
favorite bands. So I mean, they had fans. They have people who like them, and just because I don't like them
Yeah.
is no reason I should waste my time and the reader's time with something that's negative when there's so much good stuff out there that I do like that I can
Yeah.
review. You know,
I kind of felt that way about Blue Cheer. Remember them?
yeah, they were.
Summertime Blues. Their version is like so weird, but
It's very weird. But for the time, think
yeah.
about that. I mean, yeah, I think you're a little older than I am, and so it's a little more contemporary for you. But I think it was probably before your time as well.
Hmm.
And it's so distorted and it's so heavy, and it was way before any of that stuff came around.
Yeah.
I think they probably were a huge influence on the beginnings of heavy metal and punk rock both.
Yeah. And dropping acid while you play. I think that's
Yeah,
yeah, they were big on that.
long
Yeah.
hair, man. Look
Yeah.
at them. What were they? It was 67, and they had the hair.
Something like that. Summer of Love, you know.
Nobody had hair that long. They just had these. I mean, it's like,
That's right.
as somebody who's had long hair a lot of the time of his life, and known what kind of crap you get into for it, I can't imagine what they went through in the
Yeah.
60s.
Or 13th Floor Elevators. There's another one.
Oh, I remember those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I like obscure music. I like all music. I'm like you. I started in prog rock,
Did you?
and I ended up in industrial music, and yeah, it's an interesting
Yeah,
journey.
and the funny thing is, there's a lot of overlap too. There's some
Sure.
industrial music that leans towards prog, and there's some prog that leans towards industrial. And what I think is interesting, progressive rock, a lot there are different definitions of progressive rock. And some people think it's just bands like Yes and stuff like that, which to me they were progressive rock at the time because they were progressing what what music was. And I think that still bands who sound like them, I consider as prog rock. But since then, to progress the sound, you have to move in other directions. I think there are people out there called prog snobs who
Mhm.
only accept progressive rock as a certain type of music, the type of stuff they did in the 70s.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to do with Music Street Journal is sort of challenge those people and for lack of a better term, I like to sort of mess with them a little bit and kind of make them a little uncomfortable by putting things that they wouldn't think are prog under prog because they have an artistic angle or they're doing something experimental. And I think that makes them prog, really. It makes them
Yeah.
progressive anyway.
Interesting point. Yeah. Right. So you're saying that you went back to when you first started. Was it 98?
98, 98.
98. And you put into a book form each of these, what was
Yes.
before just online?
Yeah, they were online before. Now, what was weird was I had a website redo at some point along the line, and so the first few years, I lost track of what was in what issue. I could
Mhm.
track them down to what year they were, but I couldn't come up with what issue they were in. So when I did those, I did them as the early years, and I just did them as a separate year, and sort of separated them into progressive rock reviews,
Yeah.
metal reviews, and things like that. But after that, once I got to a certain point, I could do them by issue number, and each issue was released by itself as a book.
Really? So how many books in total would you say you have?
This issue is issue number 158.
Oh my goodness.
This one's actually kind of a larger cop one. This one's about close to 350 pages. Most
Wow.
of them are lined up around 200, 225 pages.
Who is buying these books?
I have no idea. I mean, I when I get from Lulu, because they're all published at Lulu.com, and I just get sales numbers. I don't know where they're going,
Oh, I see. I see.
who bought them. I don't know any of that stuff. All I know is that they sold. Um, and not all of them sell. I mean, or not all of them sell many copies either, but um, because you can get, like I say, you can get most of the stuff in there online, but you can also get it in book form, which I don't know if it were me and I were covered there, I would probably want the book, but that's just me.
Yeah,
I want it in my collection, but I'm very much a physical media kind of person. I think it's not real until you can hold something in your
I
hand,
agree.
you know.
And,
And
and if I was approached by someone who had me in their fanzine magazine when I was younger, and they turn it into a book, I'd order one. So have
yeah,
you been in touch with any of these artists that you've, covered over the years and say, hey, guess what? It's in a book form now.
no, I haven't. It's kind of weird because the thing with Music Street Journal, some of the artists we cover are like really really indie and only sell a few copies or whatever of stuff, and then we cover huge artists too. I've interviewed a lot of really interesting people over the years from big bands. I think the biggest thing we ever did as far as like a coordinated effort was in 2004. I also write for a website called Wormwood Chronicles, which is run by a friend of mine. And in 2004, Mike, who runs Wormwood Chronicles, I got the bright idea. Let's see if we can coordinate coverage of Ozfest. And so we wound up getting 4 tickets to go to the show between the two zines, two for each, and one photo pass for each. So we had 4 of us covering all the bands at Ozfest, which was pretty cool. We did some interviews. We got to shoot photographs of all the bands, and so we've covered some really big bands over the years. Funny thing about that Ozfest 2004 was I had gotten in pretty good terms with Judas Priest manager at the time, and as far as I know, no one was allowed to shoot Black Sabbath on that tour. But I got to shoot Judas Priest, and I was the only one who got a photo clearance for Judas Priest. I
Cool.
was alone in the photo area shooting those guys.
Neat, neat.
That was cool.
Yeah. Well, from the last time we spoke back in Halloween,
Yes,
I told you that too, that yeah, you kind of are living the dream, aren't you?
to some degree, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's infectious. I really like it.
Well,
It's
thank
really
you.
fun.
I sort of I take the shotgun approach, which is you just sort of send stuff out everywhere, and where it takes, it's going to take. You're not going to be huge with everything. And I sort of do the same thing with what I write about and stuff. I sort of go all over the place. Whatever interests me, I write about and I do. And some people are going to like this thing. They might not like this thing, but they're going to like this thing. And other people are going to be into this.
Yeah. Well, this is the music part of you, and you have the horror and some science fiction and
Yeah.
fantasy side of you. You got it covered. You don't write any romance novels, do you?
No, I don't think so.
No. Yeah.
Don't think I'd be into that one.
Horror romance,
There are a
perhaps.
few interests of mine that haven't gotten
Yeah, right.
my works, like trains and airplanes, which I'm
Yeah.
big into those things, but haven't covered those yet. I may.
No. And of course, now there's balloons. I don't know.
Let's not get into that one. Although I did sort of touch on UFOs in one of the spooky books.
Yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any last words you want to say about this wonderful project?
Nothing except that you can check it out at musicstreetjournal.com, and you can also go to GaryHillAuthor.com, and you'll find a whole host of Music Street Journal pages there. And oh, and I also have there's a Music Street Journal um, YouTube channel. Started since probably the last 2 or 3 years. I started doing some little bonus videos, which some of the reviews have bonuses on them because certain products you can't really capture in words just how nice the packaging is and stuff. So I do little videos showing that,
Mhm.
and I also did a little 25th anniversary thing. And coming up the next week or two, I'm going to start doing some interviews with some of the contributors that are going to go on the YouTube channel for Music Street Journal too. So you'll find that also at GaryHillAuthor.com, the link to that.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
Super. That was great. Nice to have you back on the show.
Absolutely, John. Thank you.
All right, Gary. You take care of yourself now.
You too, my friend.
Bye bye.
Bye.
And that's our show for today. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And if you are a self-published author, I would really like to speak with you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.